Hi, Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We're just going to hang for another minute or two as we see people are logging in. We'll be with you momentarily. Meanwhile, enjoy the picture. Apparently, Avi took that picture himself, so enjoy that. Enjoy the photo of Hong Kong. One more minute and we're launching. All right, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. Welcome to our first inaugural Z-Wave Alliance Virtual Academies Webinar Wednesdays, coming to you every Wednesday. We've actually got a pretty exciting agenda, a wide variety of quality content. For example, next week, we've got social distance sales for uncertain times, tips and insights for integrators. That will be presented by Jeremy McLaren from Qualsys. The following week on June 10th, we've got residential smart lock market, trends, use cases, and opportunities, and that will be presented by Colin Dupree from Salto Systems, and you may know them as Dana Lock. And the week after that is a can't miss one on June 17th, where we will be presenting Z-Wave 700 series, Getting Started. That will be delivered by Dr. Z-Wave. That's Eric Reichert from Silicon Labs. And anyway, if you have any more suggestions, please do let us know. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure that for our inaugural event that I get to introduce our speaker, one who needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. Our speaker's been connected in the connected device industry for over 20 years. He's covered all aspects of home system value chain, from co-founding one of the largest integration firms to developing products for the smart home industry, and now as the managing partner of Bluesalve Partners. That's a full-service consulting firm to the connected device industry. He's won numerous awards, including the prestigious CTA Mark of Excellence Leadership Award. Yet for me, he's best known as the foodie you want to travel the globe with. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, here's Avi Rosenthal.
Mitch, thank you so much for that gracious introduction. I do appreciate it, and welcome everybody to hopefully what will be a weekly tradition. The Z-Wave Alliance has put together these Wednesday webinars to help educate us. You know, the world is a very different place, and so today we're going to be talking about manufacturing, all right, sourcing, supply chain, where we are in the world today. I'm going to take advantage a little bit of the fact that we are the first one, so we're going to cover a little bit, just a little bit of history about what's been going on in the world. Not that any of us haven't been living it, but I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. We've got a little bit of an agenda today. There we go. All right. So we're going to talk about Bluesalve Partners for about 35 seconds, just so that everybody understands who we are. We're going to talk about the current status of the world and what's happening, mostly in Asia, because that's where the majority of the manufacturing that we're all dealing with in the connected world is coming from. We're going to talk a little bit about supply chain issues and how they're being affected by this global pandemic. And then we're going to delve into a little bit of the statistics between DIY and contractor now that we have been sort of trapped in our own places for the last 90 to 120 days, depending on where you are. There's a lot of trends going on, projects happening in people's homes, vacations are being put on hold, and so that money is being spent elsewhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about investment and what's going on in the markets. And then finally, we're going to talk mostly about the business of product development, because obviously in supply chain and things, we're going to talk about how we get things from point A to point B, but what exactly are we developing right now and what's happening in the engineering world? And then finally, we're going to talk about some conclusions. I am absolutely not going to talk politics on this webinar. We are not here to discuss politics. We're here to discuss the business world. And so the information that I'm giving you is information that has all been researched very thoroughly. If anybody has any questions, there is a question and answer box in your interface, and I welcome any questions, but just so you know, we're not going to politicize this at all. I'm in my home just like everybody else is in their home, and we're just going to have an open and frank conversation about the current state of the world in supply chain and product development. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to give you a little overview of who Bluesalve Partners are. We're a group of 12 industry veterans that have come together to help companies understand and navigate the world of connected devices. We've got decades and decades of experience in understanding product development, marketing, retail, e-tail, online, offline, big box, you name it, we know how to sell it and develop it in the consumer technology, consumer IoT spaces. So if you've got an idea, you've got a project, you've got a product, you've got a problem, we're the guys that you can turn to help you solve them. I'll give you more information at the end of the presentation about Bluesalve, and certainly if anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump out and ask us about them. So we do strategic planning, business development, sales and channel development, product development. We do fundraising advisory. We implement strategies. We write the strategies and then help implement them. We can do everything essentially from A to Z, including engineering. With that said, let's talk about what's going on in the world. We're all living it every day, right? As you can see our little graphic there, there's a big bomb going off. About 90 days ago, the world came to a screeching halt. And I don't think anybody would have predicted to the extent, when we were all together in Vegas at CES in January, and there was this little rumbling story that we were hearing about coming out of China about yet another sort of some weird flu thing happening. Nobody was really sure what it was. We had heard stories like that in the past, SARS and H1N1 and other things. And so everybody sort of looked in that direction and was a little concerned, but nobody had any idea of what we were about to all experience. I myself, those of you who know me, know that I practically live in airports. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I have not seen the inside of an airport since February 16th. If that doesn't tell you how the world has changed, I don't know what does. But as a COVID survivor myself, yes, I lived through it. I had the disease. Thankfully, I had it very minor. If everybody had the disease the way I had the disease, we would not be stuck in our homes, and I'll leave it at that. This has been a world of change. But change represents challenges, but it also represents opportunities. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is what kind of opportunities we're going to see in the new world that we're all now living. So let's talk about some timeline of the supply line issues that we're seeing, right? Back in January, somebody was talking about a virus. We really weren't sure what was going on. And then we were all going to take the standard Chinese New Year break. Every year, China, they all go on vacation for 2 weeks. It's like the largest mammal migration on the planet each year. Happens every year. The factories shut down. Everybody goes to their families. They celebrate the new year. It's a wonderful time. If you've ever had the opportunity to be in China during that time, it's really special. It's very different. But something happened this year. Things didn't open after Chinese New Year, right? The Chinese government decided to keep things closed for a little while. They were dealing with the pandemic over there. Things were slowly starting to reach into the European markets. And then we really started to see changes happen, right? A lot of us came back after Chinese New Year thinking everything is just going to restart and we're going to get the supply lines open, we're going to get manufacturing up and going. But of course, we found out that things are really, really, really strange. And then of course, March hit and we had all kinds of component shortages. A lot of the factories these days in China are working on just-in-time inventory. There's not a lot of stocking going on. And so when you have an interruption in the component sourcing, you immediately have an interruption in manufacturing. And we experienced that very, very quickly and very severely. It wasn't until early March when the US began to shut down and the ports began to change their routings. Things were being held for a little while. People weren't sure how this pandemic was actually going to spread, so they weren't sure if freight was safe for a little while. So for a few weeks, we actually had ports that were shut down. People were sheltering in place. That obviously affected it. The airlines stopped flying, right? It was surprising to me how much freight actually moves on commercial aircraft, and not just freight aircraft, but commercial passenger aircraft as well. There were so few aircraft moving around that unfortunately the freight wasn't moving around either. We are now at the point where Amazon started to prioritize essential items, which meant that even if the freight was getting here, the largest distributors, the retailers were closed. The largest distributors and retailers were not prioritizing for consumer devices necessarily, because they were all concerned about making sure that the quote unquote essential items were being prioritized and delivered first. This created, again, interruptions in the supply line and interruptions in the ability to move freight from point A to point B. Late March, FedEx announced the first of what would be 3 price increases because of their lack of ability to move freight around. They've now had 2 more price increases, one in early April and another in early May. Hopefully those will fall off now that things are starting to loosen up a little bit. But you know, there's a lot of talk about how we're moving freight, what the differences are. There are still ships coming into ports, but again, a lot of the ports on the other side of the oceans were not allowing the freight to be put on the ships for a while. We're just now, this is the last week of May, right? And so June 1st is coming around. We're just now starting to see things bounce back from that perspective. The world is beginning to open. Factories are in fact working in China. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. However, we're dealing with long lead times, right? Very long lead times for components that typically were on a 6 to 8 week turn are now more like a 12 to 14 week turn. So you place an order, you expect it in 60 to 90 days. It's now taking more like 90 to 120 days before your freight is ready to leave the factory. That's going to slow everything down as we move through the summertime and into the fall. Of course, the stock market has rebounded or is on the mend, right? Which is a very interesting dichotomy. 40 million people out of work, the stock market is coming back, money is flowing, we are able to pay the bills to place orders. The question is, who's going to buy it once it gets here? And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along as well. So currently in Asia, and of course I had to put up a food slide. Mitch will tell you all about, you know, for me traveling to Asia, yes, it's all about business, but it's really all about the food. I just go there for the food. So China is still not allowing foreigners in without special passes. The factories are all open and operating. My lack of ability to travel, for instance, means that I have been keeping some very late nights talking to the factories directly on the phones. Of course, they're not having the late nights. We're having the late nights. So, but the ports are open for inbound and outbound freight. So at least what the factories are producing is able to leave the country and be exported, right? But travel is still somewhat restricted amongst the provinces. They're watching very carefully for any kind of additional outbreak or hot zones or any problems like that. Hong Kong, it looked like Hong Kong was going to open. I had my fingers crossed. I was actually supposed to travel to Hong Kong on June 6th. That trip has now been canceled. Hong Kong is still somewhat on lockdown. The politics of Hong Kong are also getting a little dicey. And so, you know, those are becoming issues as well that Hong Kong is going to have to deal with. However, it has been announced that the Hong Kong airport, as of June 1st, will be open again for transit flights. And so that's a big step. Hong Kong, obviously a large regional airport, large international airport, but a large airport in the region that allows for people to pass from place to place through Hong Kong as a transit airport. Up until now has been closed. Hong Kong is now opening. They are saying that by June 15th, foreigners will be let in again without a quarantine period. Right now, you can travel to Hong Kong under very specific conditions. They've actually, if you're familiar with the airport, the Expo Center is right up right around the corner via the subway, via the train. Right now, that's the testing center. You land in Hong Kong, you have to go to the expo center, get a test, wait 7 hours. If you're negative, you're let back in. If you're positive, your butt's gone. But ports are open, inbound and outbound freight. Taiwan, everybody is up and operating. Flights are starting to fly again. The ports are open again. India, still on lockdown, right? India's had some spikes as of late. There is limited port movement due to staff. I'm actually working with a vendor right now that's based outside of Mumbai. And we had a lot of trouble. They just wanted to send me a sample, and it took them 3 weeks just to find a carrier to get the sample on a plane to get to me. So in the Indian marketplace is still very much in a shaky situation. Vietnam, been wide open. Malaysia is still on lockdown. Interesting contrast between those two. Vietnam has had fewer than 1,000 cases of COVID-19 in the entire country. They really got ahead of this thing very early on. They were able to control it. And so they're able to open up a little bit earlier. Malaysia, though, conversely, was not able to get a handle on it early on and is still in a lockdown status, as are some of the other countries in that area of the world. So we're going to shift direction a little bit now. Let's talk more about what's going on here in the United States. Obviously, if the product can be produced in Asia, it's all about who's going to buy it once it gets here. And so my friends at the Farnsworth Group were kind enough to send me over some data that we can talk about. They've been doing some trending data since actually early March. Some of these graphs will show early March, some will show mid-March, but the Farnsworth guys have actually put together some very interesting trend data around projects within our homes. The first thing that we saw, interestingly enough, when everybody went on lockdown was people started to do projects within their homes because they realized that they were going to be trapped there for a while. The first concern, obviously, was making sure everybody had good Wi-Fi, right? Everybody had to make sure that they could actually, if they were going to work from home, they needed to work from home successfully. The next thing they thought about was, you know, that room that I've been putting off painting, why don't we see if we can get that done, or that remodel, you know, that minor project, that DIY project needs to happen. Everybody's in their home and they're staring at their projects or their potential projects all day. And so interestingly enough, we've seen a spike. You'll see that this chart goes up as high as 71% late April, where people are actually starting a new DIY project in and around their home in the last week. And that trend has stayed fairly steady. Interestingly enough, people are in fact doing things. Now, the problem is with them all stuck in their homes, the next question is, where are they buying this stuff, right? Well, the home improvement stores were all deemed essential. If you remember when the world started collapsing on itself and everything started to close, the home supply stores were all deemed essential. So they all stayed open the entire time during this lockdown phase. And so interestingly enough, people are still going out and buying the supplies that they need in order to do the home improvement projects that they've been working on. And so that's a really interesting statistic. We have seen a bit of an increase in the online. If you look at the yellow line, you'll see that that line has been trending up. But a lot of the things that people have been doing involve product that's either unshippable, right? Amazon doesn't sell big gallons of paint. Oh, I guess they do sell big gallons of paint, but people don't think of Amazon as some place to buy paint. They want to go, they want to look at the color, get it mixed, pick up the paint and bring it home. Whereas, you know, you've seen deliver at home was trending up. It's now trending a little bit down. I was hoping to have the May 18th statistics, but they did not get published in time. But the upward trend of in-store, you'll see, was the trend was going down until about early May, when all of a sudden things started to open up, and now people are actually venturing back out and going to the stores. So what are their plans though, right? As this has gone on, right, what you're seeing is a trend that the plan is still to start more projects in and around their house. The blue and the red lines are still trending upwards, right? You can still see that people are starting to do it even through the uncertainty, if you will, of the entire pandemic. They are still willing to start projects in and around their homes and improve their living spaces. So that's very optimistic, especially for our industry when it comes to connected devices and in-home improvements. You know, maintenance, repair, replacement, you know, whatever they're doing, at least they're still thinking about doing it. They're still spending money. So a question that just came up was the average product purchase price. Farnsworth unfortunately doesn't track the amount of money being spent, only the trends within the projects themselves. So this is, I don't have money, I don't have dollar figures, but obviously people are starting projects and so they're spending money. So let's now shift over to contractors. Contractors obviously have had a much harder go of it. The building industry essentially ground to a halt in mid-March. It is now just starting to pick up again. People are in fact building homes again. The real estate market, I saw an interesting statistic last week. The mortgage market is coming back. People are actually signing up for mortgages again. Home prices have not eroded during this time. So home values have stayed the same. So there is opportunity out there, at least for homeowners. This graph, however, says, it sort of tells a little bit of a different story, right? The contract is obviously on a downward trend, right? But that purple line is the worst case scenario, right? The purple line is, are your project requests been higher or lower? Everybody's saying lower, but now all of a sudden that purple line is dipping, right? And the blue line at the bottom, right, somewhat higher, is trending up. So hopefully at some point those two lines cross, but at least we're trending in the right direction. And so the contractor business is starting to come back, all right? How did it impact? This one I put up there because it's very interesting. Now, obviously the top line is homeowners didn't want people in their homes, right? We were all sheltering in place. There was an uncomfortable situation. People weren't sure what to do and how to deal with it. But the more interesting line is that orange line at the bottom. The orange line took a severe dip in April, right? Because it's the labor line. It's, I can't find enough guys to do the work. And now all of a sudden, that line is trending back up. The other interesting line is the light purple line. They couldn't get materials, right? That one also is coming back. So that means that at least the contractors, the projects are coming back online a little bit. They're able to find labor to do the projects, and they're able to get supplies in order to accomplish the goals. So those are all positive things that are happening within the marketplace itself. So investment. All of these things being said, at the end of the day, if there's no money being pumped into the economy, of course, it's really difficult to start a new project, start a new company, execute on a new idea. The good news is the VC and the angel deals are happening again. Although we saw a trend in late February, early March, everything stopped, everything dried up, mostly because the market was in the toilet, right? We saw that precipitous drop of the stock market, investment capital, investors went running for their, their covers because they didn't know what was going to happen. The stock market is now on a recovery trend. And because they're on that recovery trend and because they're starting to re-engage with smaller companies. And so the investors themselves are now taking the phone calls. They're actually making investments. They're closing deals. We had a client just this past week close a 7-figure investment deal. So things are definitely coming back now that the stock market is coming back and the banks are feeling more comfortable. The feds obviously have pumped a tremendous amount of money into the economy in order to lift things up. They've made sure that the mistakes or the I won't say mistakes, that's the wrong word. The situation that occurred in 2008, 2009 did not occur this time. And so the market definitely has responded to the economic trends that are occurring, and now they've started to recover. The banks are pretty much over the paperwork nightmares that they were dealing with over the last 60 days between the EIDL programs and the PPP. There was a lot of confusion out there. There was a lot of uncertainty. That uncertainty now has sort of turned around. But obviously a sound investment is still a sound investment, right? They're still looking at good, strong companies, good, strong ideas, opportunities that are in the marketplace. And so now that the banking industry is sort of back on its feet and the investment capital is back on its feet, the money is starting to flow within the economy. What happens next? I'm not an economist. I'm not here to give you economic forecast. I can only give you what my small little world looks like. Right now, my small little world is looking pretty good. I can tell you that from a connected device perspective, there is a lot of activity in the connected device space. There's a lot of activity within the manufacturers. We did see some furloughs, obviously, in the integration world. We saw lots of furloughs in manufacturing during the uncertainty. Those are now trending down. People are now getting back to work. There is an opportunity out there. Obviously, there were a lot of good people furloughed. And so if you're a company looking for talent, there's a lot of good talent on the street. A lot of people eager, obviously, to get back to work, but certainly people that have been been doing very well in our industry now have an opportunity to jump and to move around. I don't know if you all saw the news this morning. This may be breaking news. I don't know, but Savant made a huge purchase this morning. Savant bought GE Lighting. GE Lighting, the 150-year-old lighting company, the original inventors somewhat of the light bulb, are now owned by Savant, or will be when they close the deal. So that just shows you that there is investment opportunity out there. The Savant guys are, it's too early to tell exactly what they're going to do with it. I just read the news before I came online with you fine folks. But that shows me that mergers and acquisitions are still occurring because there is confidence in the connected device marketplace, right? Clearly there is confidence in the upward trend. So a note, I know that we have some integrators on the phone and some small businesses on the line with us today. If you received any assistance from the CARES Act, please make sure you follow the guidelines very carefully. Keep to those guidelines. There, nobody knows exactly what's going to happen next. So make sure you keep your bookkeeping. That's my little tip for the day, if you will. So product development, near and dear to my heart. I've got 20 years experience in the product development cycle. I can tell you that product development is very healthy right now. We're seeing a lot of product development in the cycle and new products coming out. Obviously, all eyes right now are on fall and the holiday season, which is typical for this time of year. Usually this time of year in the May-June timeframe, the companies that are preparing for the holiday season are putting their finishing touches on products for the fall, because we've got to do development over the summer. We've got to get manufacturing going. There's a lot of freelance work out there because of the furloughed engineers and the furloughed people. A lot of people are looking for short-term employment. And so that's a good opportunity for smaller companies to bring in some talent and to get some product development work and some engineering work done. However, because of the break in the supply line, what we're seeing is longer cycles, longer tooling cycles on getting product out the door. We're seeing 40 working day cycles to get tooling done, which is a little bit longer than average. That's actually growing. When I wrote this about a week ago, it was 40. We're now seeing more like 45. So that's adding an additional week to the tooling projects that are out there. The good news is there's money to be funded. The amount of the cost of the tooling and the cost of the product development seems to be somewhat static and somewhat consistent. However, things are taking longer to get done. So the takeaway from that is to make sure that if you are preparing something for the fall selling season, that you make sure all of your ducks are in a row right now. With the travel restrictions, I myself, by June, usually I will have been in Asia at least 2 to 3 times already for the year. I have been to Asia a whopping 0 times so far. That has caused a lot of slowdown. A number of projects that I started working on in February that normally would be in production right now are just now getting to the point where we can start to order long lead time parts. Typically, my cycles are running 60 to 90 days. Right now, they're running more like 120 to 180 days. And that has a lot to do with the fact that, when I do a first shot tool, I would be in China, right there with the product, inspecting it, making sure it was ready to go, making sure that it looked right, making sure that it fit the bill. Unfortunately, now what's happening is I have to wait for a shipment to come to me. I have to get on the phone with somebody. We have to describe it to somebody via a camera or a Zoom meeting. And then I have to wait for an update. They have to send me another sample. And so it has really lengthened the amount of time that it takes in order to get things approved. And with fewer flights, it's difficult to get those samples. I talked about the problem we had with the samples coming out of India. It took almost 3 weeks to find a flight and a shipment to get something to us. China's a little bit better. There's more freight moving now, but still, it's also increased costs, right? With FedEx increasing the amount that it costs to send the average box, they're on their 3rd round of price increases. it's getting expensive. Now, is it as expensive as an airline ticket? No, but the time it's taking me in order to get this accomplished is certainly affecting our ability to get the product cycles and the development cycles done. Component lead times are also much longer. Typical component lead times for what we call popcorn, right? The small componentry that ends up on the PCBs was usually 60 to 90 days. We're now looking at more like 8 to 12 weeks. And for some product and processor product, things that had to come from foundries, more sophisticated product, we're actually seeing 20 to 24 weeks. Well, if you do some quick math and you realize 24 weeks from June 1st is going to push you into the fall. That's a long time to wait before you can build a new product, especially if you're up against the holiday selling season and you want to get product out the door. And so what we're doing is there's a lot of spot market buying. There's a lot of shifting going on within the manufacturing marketplace in order for things to be bought and sold quickly. Prices haven't been affected all that much yet, but it is my opinion that we're going to start to see some upward pricing movement, especially when the big guys start to get really back into their manufacturing and the spot market starts to dry up. And so, you know, it's getting tighter and tighter. So, some conclusions, right? The world is a different place. Gee whiz, there's a duh moment right there, right? Obviously, the world is a very different place. The fact that we're even talking about this is only proof that the world is a very different place. But Asia is opening up and manufacturing is restarting. The trade issues that occurred prior to 2020 have somewhat been mitigated, right? A lot of the tariffs and things have sort of been put on hold while the world economy takes a step back to see what's going on. And so the good news there is that, you know, the Chinese manufacturers are starting to come online and we're not as concerned about tariffs as we were before. Prior to 2020, we did see some movement of manufacturing moving from mainland China into other places, Malaysia, Vietnam, Taiwan, right? We're all starting up manufacturing plants. Vietnam is doing quite well right now. Their plants are up and running and things are going smoothly. Taiwan, also, things seem to be loosening up and opening up. Malaysia, different story. They're still under some restrictions and their factories haven't come back online yet to the same extent, right? So there are always pockets of things. So as Asia comes back online, this has also shown that, you know, maybe we need to do a little bit more manufacturing here in the US, and there's obviously been a trend. The largest chip manufacturer in Taiwan is talking about opening a plant in Arizona, but it takes years, it takes years for that to happen, right? Even the plant that they're talking about building in Arizona is not going to be fully online until 2024. And so we've got short-term issues and long-term issues. And so short-term, we're going to be dealing with the Asian marketplace for the foreseeable future once things start to improve here in the States between Mexico and the US and the Southwest. But people are realizing that their homes need that little TLC, right? We've all been trapped in our homes for a period of time now. They're talking about the summer travel season essentially being put on hold. That disposable income is going to be spent somewhere else. And so there is an opportunity for both the integrators and the manufacturers of connected devices to take advantage of improving what's going on in our homes and in our living spaces. As well, the commercial spaces are all changing. My wife is in commercial office space. She actually designs offices for the federal government, and she's already seeing a trend of higher walls, partitions, whereas the trend in office space has been to knock down those walls and to have open workspaces. If people are going back to their offices at all, they're now asking for, you know, no fabric surfaces, easily cleanable surfaces, laminate, and higher cubicle walls. Whether or not that becomes a long-term trend, time will tell. But obviously, we all have also a lot of major companies that are now saying people can work from home forever, right? Twitter has announced, and Facebook and Google have announced longer periods of time and different work environments so that their people can work from home. That's obviously going to be a trend for a little while, at least until we're past the pandemic. Maybe when a vaccine comes out, things will loosen up again. I'm not here to judge the politics of it. I'm only here to look at the trends and the opportunities for connected devices, if we want to understand things like indoor air quality, and we want to understand how often the air gets exchanged, and how we clean the surfaces and how clean the surfaces are, right? Those are all opportunities for sensor networks and for machine learning and artificial intelligence that our industry can certainly take advantage of. We were moving towards that trend before the pandemic, and certainly now the pandemic is going to accelerate those trends and those work from home. So there is an opportunity. From every challenge raises an opportunity. Investment is certainly coming back, right? As long as the stock market keeps rising, investment capital will be there. People have talked about, V recoveries and W recoveries and up and down recoveries. And again, I'm not an economist, but I can tell you that the trend right now, as long as the market is going up, the VCs, the angels, the seed investors are all bringing money back into the marketplace. And so as long as those investors are bringing in the money, then the smaller companies are able to come up and able to develop. But products are definitely taking longer to develop, right? We're seeing trends and sort of supply chain and supply lines that are still in a fragile state. And so the product development cycle is definitely getting longer. Hopefully that won't be a long-term trend, that'll be a short-term trend, but at the moment, that's what we're dealing with. So things that I'm watching are things that we've talked about, right? Business travel. I can't wait to get back on an airplane, right? I absolutely cannot wait to get back on an airplane. But office environments, whether the trend will be taller walls and cleaner surfaces, whether it be work from home, whether it be indoor air quality, more sensor networks, touchless access control, all of these are opportunities within the commercial and office environments, right? Work from home strategies, things like stronger Wi-Fi and stronger broadband brought into people's homes, rural broadband, the digital divide, right? If you've read anything with all of the kids out of school, there are unfortunately, even in our, the richest country in the world, there are still kids that don't have connected devices within the home and aren't able to get their schoolwork done. So hopefully that gets solved. Those kinds of things rise up to be noticed, and those are the things that get solved within our environments. And certainly wellness, both in our homes and our offices, right? The new fashion statement now, everybody walks around in a mask, which interestingly enough has always been the trend in Asia. The Japanese, the Chinese, the Koreans have always walked around in masks when there are sicknesses and diseases, or they feel unwell and they want to make sure that they don't spread things to others. I always thought it was an interesting trend when I traveled overseas, and now obviously that trend is here as well. And so, those are things that we're going to be dealing with, for a while, is sort of the wellness in our homes and our offices, how we deal with that wellness, how we deal with the environments that we live in. So those are the conclusions. If there are questions, I'm here to answer them. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'm looking at the big clock on the wall. So please feel free to type. There's a section in your interface for questions and answers, and we can certainly talk about that. If you want to reach me directly, please feel free. I am avi@bluesalve.com, and please feel free to follow us at Bluesalve Partners on Twitter, where we have a LinkedIn page, as well as our website. You can get more information about Bluesalve and the things that we're doing for our clients. But I'd like to thank you very much for spending a little time with me today and talking about what's going on in the supply world. If there are any questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Avi. It's a lot to think about here. Hey, I'm just kind of wondering, talking about travel and everything being put off, what have you noticed the trends in terms of the cost for travel? Have you seen, since demand is down, typically the economists would tell you when supply goes up and demand goes down, you generally see price drops. What are you seeing in terms of travel?
So it's very interesting. When I caught the disease and I recovered, the first thing I did was I booked a trip overseas, because I figured, well, if I've recovered from it, that means I get to travel freely, never even realizing that the rest of the world is still shut down. And I was able to find very, very strong fares. This was in mid-April when I recovered. So very, very good fares over to Japan and then on to Hong Kong. It was a bit of a convoluted route because there was no single airline that I could take from the States to get there. I obviously ended up not taking that trip because the countries were not allowing anybody in. Even those of us who have recovered are still somewhat suspect, right? It's been an interesting experience, but the pricing is still fairly low. The problem is it's sort of like the butcher who's out of meat lowers his prices in his windows because the prices are really good, but when you book a flight, my flight, for instance, next week was a really good price. I think I paid about $3,000 round trip from the East Coast to Hong Kong in business class, which is a really good price. The problem
Nice.
is the flight's not going. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because every time I try to change these flights, of course, they change them for free, but they don't necessarily honor the fare that you paid prior. So, I'm going to move this flight to late July when the sourcing shows are supposed to take place. And those flights are, another $800-900 more. They're happy to change them for free, but they're still going to charge me the $800 or $900 additional. So it'll be interesting to see once the flights are there. Domestically, what I'm seeing is the flights are fairly expensive. There's not a lot of people flying. There are very few flights. I'm actually supposed to fly to Orlando tomorrow to go see my daughter, who I haven't seen since last November. We currently have flights booked. They were about $400 between DC and Orlando, which is about double what they normally are. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the trend is with business travel. I read a lot of business travel blogs, as you would imagine, because I'm a business road warrior. And what the business blogs are saying is that a lot of the business meetings, the one-off business meeting that you may have traveled for prior is now pretty much going to be done the way that you and I are talking right now. And that it's really going to be event travel or group gathering, which of course we can't do at the moment, in order for business people to travel. So it's going to be an interesting trend to see what happens. I can tell you, for me, I can't wait to get back on an airplane, but I'm one of those weird people that actually enjoy traveling. So.
Of course, understood. And the fare on canceled flights is pretty low, I understand.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you can,
yeah,
right, exactly. It's
yeah,
a
exactly.
strange, and it's funny because when I call United Airlines, who is my airline of choice, and I get on the phone with the 1K desk, there's always a great story, right? There's always, you get on the phone with one of the nice people on the phone, and they tell you all about how, yes, yeah, I'm the 8th person they've spoken to today who's only wanted to move a flight and wants to go. And of course we can't go because there's nowhere to go, which is really strange.
Amazing. Yeah. We actually had a question earlier on in terms of the charts that you were showing in terms of what is that vertical axis? I don't know if we're going to go back to any of those charts, but
Yeah, I can scroll up. So the vertical axis is the percentage of people. All right. So if you look,
yep.
each of those vertical axes is the percentage of respondents to the answer to that question.
Okay.
Okay. So
That
we've
makes
got
sense. Yeah.
time, and then we've got how many people. So they're polling. They're mostly doing online and phone polls, and so there's always a certain survey size, right? And so that's the percentage of the survey.
I see. And they may not totally add up to 100, but some people must have voted twice.
Yeah, they never seem to add up to 100. I
No,
don't know.
they
That's one of
don't.
those
I
statistical
know.
anomalies that we'd have to get a statistician on the phone to explain all that. But yeah, there's they come close. They come close. Yeah.
So I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm also curious in terms of all the DIY projects. Are there any specific product trends within the connected world, and like what kind of products themselves people are
So a lot
buying?
of it is repair and remodeling. I don't have any specific trends. I have a lot of anecdotal data. I've had some conversations with some people in Home Depot and Lowe's. I've also had numerous conversations with integrators. Obviously, early on, it was all about Wi-Fi, right? It was all about people
Mm-hmm.
were, the Best Buy will tell you that they had an incredible month in March, right? They sold out of a whole bunch of Wi-Fi devices because everybody realized that their Wi-Fi was just sort of okay. But when everybody was on a video conference and the kids were, on video for school and things like that, it never could keep up. And so they did a really great business in improving people's Wi-Fi and routers and things in the marketplace. A lot of it is repair projects. So you get a lot of paint and a lot of, remodel, things like that. But I've also spoken to integrators who tell me that once people are starting to let them into their houses, there's a lot of convenient stuff. So the cameras, the safety and security, and then the lighting control. A lot of lighting controls are being sold. I speak to my friends who are in distribution, and they tell me that there's a lot of lighting control devices. Excuse me, a lot of lighting control devices that have been sold over the last few weeks, because people again are noticing. You know, I hear about this really cool connected device stuff, and I'm not taking advantage of it because I was never home enough to remember to do it. Now they're home, they're noticing that they haven't gotten it done, and so it's a good opportunity for them to work on things like that.
Of course, anecdotally speaking, myself, I replaced 40 some odd dimmers and switches in my house.
There you go.
There it is. Yep.
Yeah.
So when we talk about all these delays, you know, another 40 days or so to get product, do you have any specific advice to any suppliers and manufacturers in terms of what to do and how to address those delays?
So unfortunately, there's not a lot that you can do other than make sure you have good relationships with your contract manufacturers. The difference between an okay CM and a really good CM is their ability to manage through these supply line differences. And so what this has really shown me is the differences between those contract manufacturers that our clients are using. And it's not about using the big guys. I won't name big guys, but it's not just about using the big guys. There are plenty of mid-tier contract manufacturers out there that do an exceptional job and have the ability to manage through these supply line challenges, we'll call them, right? It's also about the flexibility of your design. As we've gone through the design process with a lot of our clients, we've gone back and redesigned a couple of things on the fly in order to find product that is more available than others. And so again, working with your distributors and your contract manufacturers, it's your ability to be flexible in your designs that will enable you to find the products that work well in your design, but get you to the market quicker. And that's one of the things that we do with our clients is help them manage through that process. And so you may need an A9 processor, but you wanted to use one from a specific manufacturer, and we find you an alternative to that product in order to make sure that you can get your product produced because this processor is more available than others. And then it's obviously managing the costs associated with those devices themselves, right? And we've been very successful in finding on the spot market. The interesting part is that the spot market typically is a 20 to 25% increase over ordering directly from a manufacturer. And we've actually seen the spot market, because it is more popular right now, closing that delta, right? So the spot market's been more like 15 to 20% higher than before. So it's very interesting how the manufacturers and the contract manufacturers and the distributors have sort of been adapting to this new world order because, you know, they need to move product too. The CMs, it's all about turns. It's all for the distributors. It's all about inventory turns. And so they're doing whatever they can to make sure that they're achieving their goals as well. So it's been a very interesting process. Great learning experience.
I'll say, and hopefully we're not learning anymore, right?
Yeah.
So there's some of the pundits, of course, are saying that, well, we're going to have a relapse in the fall or something like that. If something like that were to happen, do you have any recommendations in terms of preparing yourself for, let's say, the eventual repeat or relapse of the pandemic?
So the advice that we're giving our clients is to order, 15 to 20% more product than they would normally order on a. So if your MOQ, if your minimum order quantity was 5,000 units, we're telling people order 6,000. Put the money in the product, get a little bit more, protect yourself from supply line issues that may occur in the fall. If there is a bounce, if this thing does come back the way that some are saying it does, then the first thing that's going to be affected, obviously, is going to be the supply lines. And so we want to make sure that we have enough stock. But don't over order, right? Don't double your order, don't triple your order, don't prepay for things. Because obviously if it does come back, then the economy is going to be affected as well. And so we don't want to see anybody get caught flat-footed with more stock than what they need. But protecting yourself and sort of hedging your bets on some orders, especially for connected devices, is a smart idea. We want to make sure that there's enough supply line in order to fulfill whatever needs we have in the fourth quarter. The consumer product side is predicted to be very strong in the fourth quarter, right? The CTA is still saying that the fourth quarter should, we should still see a fairly strong holiday season. There's a lot of great gaming systems and things coming out for the holiday season this year. So 2020 is shaping up to be, a really nice electronics holiday season. So you want to protect yourself from that demand, and we want to make sure that we can supply through it. However, if there is a double bounce, right, if there is this this reoccurrence, then it's going to affect things in a potentially negative way. And so you don't want to spend too much money if you don't have to.
We'll end up with the inventory that others don't have, and
Right.
you can capitalize upon that.
Exactly.
So, Avi, this has been absolutely fabulous. With some great advice. I know you're part of a really strong team at Bluesalve Partners. There's a lot of talent on that group, and I want to thank you. Actually, if you want to go to your last slide there, in case someone has any questions or wants to reach out to you directly, you all know Avi can operate a computer. There we go.
Oh, there it goes.
Yes. Anyway. Yeah, so again, I want to thank you, Avi, very much. We really appreciate you doing this, inaugural webinar Wednesday. Wish you and Bluesalve the best of success. And of course, everyone be safe. And we look forward to seeing you again a week from now with our next session.
Thank you so much, Mitch. It's been my pleasure to be here. I really did enjoy it. Hopefully we can do another one.
We'll count on that.